In this story, let's start. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. If someone had told me a year ago that my life would take this turn, I would have laughed. But here I was, standing in my kitchen, staring at the suitcase in the hallway. His suitcase. My sister's son had moved in with us. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, just until she got back on her feet after the divorce. He was 21, trying to figure out his life. My husband was constantly traveling for work, so having someone else in the house seemed like a good idea. At first, the first few weeks were normal. We fell into a routine: morning coffee, casual conversations about work, dinner together when schedules allowed. He was polite, easygoing, grateful to have a place to stay. But then, things shifted. I started noticing small things. The way he'd hold eye contact a second too long, how he'd find excuses to be near me, brushing past in the kitchen or leaning in closer than necessary. The way his voice softened when he said my name. It wasn't obvious, not enough to call it out, but it was there, a subtle shift. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was reading too much into harmless interactions. But something deep inside me knew better. Then, one evening, I came home earlier than usual. He was outside working on the backyard. The golden hour light made everything look softer, warmer. He had his sleeves rolled up, his shirt damp from the heat. I hesitated before stepping outside, my hand gripping the doorframe. And in that moment, something in my gut twisted. A warning, maybe. A feeling that whatever was happening between us wasn't just in my head. I should have walked away that night, closed the door, pushed the thought from my mind, and pretended I never noticed anything. But I didn't. A few days later, we ended up on the back porch together. My husband was away again, and the house felt quieter than usual. I poured a glass of wine, and he joined me. It wasn't planned. It just happened. The air was thick with humidity, the faint hum of crickets filling the silence between us. We talked about everything and nothing. His plans, his struggles, my work, my marriage. I don't know how, but the conversation shifted. He asked me if I was happy. A simple question, yet it felt like it carried more weight than it should have. I laughed it off, gave some half-hearted response. But his eyes stayed on me, waiting. Then, his knee brushed against mine under the table. It was small, subtle, but I felt it like a shockwave. I could have pulled away. Should have. But I didn't. I told myself it was nothing, an accident. But when I looked at him, I saw it. The awareness, the unspoken question hanging between us. I got up, excused myself, and went inside. But even as I lay in bed that night, I knew something had changed. Avoidance became my new strategy. I kept myself busy, left the house early, stayed out late. When I was home, I made sure there was always space between us. No more late-night conversations, no more lingering moments. It was the only way to keep everything in check. But it didn't work. One evening, I walked into the garage, expecting it to be empty. But he was there, fixing something at the workbench. He turned at the sound of my footsteps, wiping his hands on a rag. "You've been avoiding me," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something unreadable. I forced a laugh. "Don't be ridiculous." He just looked at me, waiting. The tension in the air was suffocating. "This needs to stop," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. He took a slow breath. "Then stop it." He wasn't challenging me. He wasn't pushing. But the way he said it, like it was completely up to me, made something inside me unravel. I should have turned and walked away. Instead, I stood there, frozen, caught between logic and something far more dangerous. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't sure which side I wanted to win. I told myself it wouldn't happen, that no matter how close we got to the edge, I wouldn't let us fall. But some moments are stronger than logic, and that night I stopped fighting. The house was quiet. I stepped outside for fresh air, thinking I was alone, but he was already there. He looked at me, and I knew. There were no words, no hesitation. It just happened. It was brief but undeniable. a moment that shifted everything. The second it was over, reality crashed down on me. I stepped back, my breath unsteady, heart pounding in my chest. "This is wrong," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince me otherwise. He just stood there, watching as I turned and walked inside. I locked the door behind me, as if that could undo what had just happened. But I knew the truth. I had let it happen. I had crossed a line that could never be erased. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning felt different. Heavy. The weight of the night before clung to me as I moved through the house, my mind racing with everything I had just done. I thought I'd feel guilt, maybe even regret. But what scared me most was that I didn't. Not yet. I expected to see him in the kitchen, drinking his usual coffee, pretending nothing had happened. But the house was empty. No footsteps upstairs, no sounds from the garage. My stomach twisted as I walked through the hallway. And then I saw it. His bag was gone. On the counter, a note. Just a few words, scribbled in his messy handwriting. I had to leave. Please don't hate me. The air left my lungs. I read it again, slower this time, as if the meaning would change. He was gone. I should have been relieved. This was the right thing, wasn't it? The way out before it got worse. But standing there, gripping that note, all I felt was a hollow space where something used to be. I thought back to every moment. The stolen glances, the near misses, the night on the porch when everything shifted. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And now I was left with the fallout, alone. Days passed, then a week. I told myself I was moving on, that I had buried it. But late one evening, as I sat outside watching the sunset, my phone buzzed. A message. "I don't know how to fix this, but I can't stop thinking about it. About you." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. A million thoughts ran through my mind, but only one stuck. This wasn't over. This is an artistic and fictional creation intended for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. Some scenes and dialogues in the video are part of a dramatized performance and incorporate elements of grotesque, satire, and exaggeration. The creator stands against discrimination, violence, and hatred. This channel fully complies with YouTube's policies and does not infringe upon copyright laws.